Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi. I'm a fellow at the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. So, this week in my Prince Eye on China column, I dug into the Chinese discourse on the most talked about event that happened over the weekend, or should I call it the most unexpected and heated spat between the US President Donald Trump, along with his VP JD Vance, and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. So, from the Chinese perspective, this spat was striking, not just for what happened, how it happened, not just for the intensity, but also for what it reveals about shifting global power dynamics and how diplomacy has been um, tossed and the diplomatic negotiations are uh, kind of being replaced by these heated debates on live television. So this was striking in China, particularly where political discourse actually follows a controlled script. So that was actually unfathomable for a lot of Chinese to watch it, that such an exchange could actually happen. But beyond the spectacle, number of Chinese analysts are also discussing the broader implications for China. So, what does this actually mean for Beijing's strategic positioning? This is one of the main points of discussions that I saw on the Chinese internet and the discussions among the strategic community. So, one emerging narrative within the Chinese discussion is that Trump's engagement with Russia and this attempt to kind of reduce Russia's isolation is less about resolving the dispute. It's less about resolving the Ukraine conflict. It's less about the peace that Donald Trump has been talking about. But from the Chinese perspective, it is more about recalibrating US strategy towards China and perhaps attempts to weaken the so called no test limit partnership between China and Russia. And in fact, if you look at what Donald Trump has been saying, even during the meeting, he kept talking about Biden administration flaws in keeping the dispute alive. And perhaps this was also a part of undoing what Biden has done. And one of the things that Biden has also done, according to Trump, is to keep perhaps bring Russia and China closer. So when Trump thinks that Biden administration inadvertently strengthen this China-Russia partnership. I think through this perspective, Trump appears to be exploring a different approach. Perhaps he's also trying to realign with Moscow to counterbalance Beijing, or perhaps if he thinks that if he isn't able to reduce this gap between US and Russia, there would be more gap between China and Russia, and perhaps Russia is also looking for alternatives, and US is providing a window of opportunity for Russia. So this is also one of the major points of discussion, that this is one of the reasons why Trump is going for this, um, trying to be a peace broker, trying to be closer to Russia and praising Russian president so much openly. Then Chinese scholar Shui Kai Huan, he argues that Trump, his priority is uniting with Russia so that he's able to contain China. But there are a number of scholars who caution against overinterpreting this shift or this perspective. For example, Professor Shani from Fudan University, he suggests that Beijing should maintain strategic patience, and rather than acting impulsively to speculative geopolitical shift, Beijing should weigh its option and see how the things are going to unfold in times to come. Then, apart from the China Russia equation, another critical discussion in Chinese policy circles revolves around what is Ukraine's next step going to be. And now that the US has frozen the aid, how Ukraine is going to react, and how if Ukraine is going to reach out more meaningfully to China. And in fact, if you look at it in the past uh, years, Ukraine has been critical of Chinese approach, and China has never publicly condemned Russia. And in fact, even though they kept saying that there is neutrality in their approach in this conflict, I think there is no doubt that China actually sided with Russia. If you look at their actions, if you look at the statement that came out of China, it's very much clear that China sided with Russia. There could be multiple reasons behind that, but there's no doubt the outcome of was that China and Russia did become closer, and that was something that wasn't really liked in Kiev. Then some Chinese analysts believe that following this political fallout, open fallout from Washington, Ukraine might turn towards Beijing for aid which I don't think that China is going to give, but more importantly for post-war reconstruction. And there are proposals from the Chinese scholars that China should perhaps pursue a resource exchange model, potentially trading grain and minerals for Chinese expertise in infrastructure. Then, apart from that, um, this is something that a lot of scholars have discussed, that Chinese should strengthen their positioning in this aspect, and this is where Chinese long-term positioning comes into play. Then many Chinese commentators also argue that Beijing's approach, which is now focused on, this is what they think and this is what they project, that this is focused on security, stability, and economic pragmatism, and the projection of how China has been advocating for a peaceful solution of the conflict. Multilateralism, multipolarity is something that now we see everywhere, that China is a responsible global leader, stakeholder, and unlike Trump, unlike the West, China has always advocated for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. And that actually stands in contrast to Western strategies that, in their view, prioritize power politics over sustainable development. So the idea that China is looking to end the conflict, but it's the West that has been fueling the conflict. And even now, when Trump is trying to be a negotiator, a peace broker, it is in the US interest. It's not about the interest of the regional, the world peace, or regional and world peace and the rules based order. Then uh, a lot of scholars, a lot of commentators on Chinese internet, of course, have called Trump's policies chaotic, unpredictable, and his foreign policy, according to them, is becoming more and more unpredictable. That's also sparking debate about what is going to happen to Taiwan if Ukraine support from the US is subjected to shifting priorities. If Trump could abandon Ukraine, what does that signal for the US commitment towards Taiwan? That was one of the heated topics of discussion on the Chinese internet. So, this question is increasingly relevant, of course, in Chinese strategic calculations. And over the past years, we've also seen parallels drawn between Ukraine and Taiwan. We have also seen commentaries that talked about how Xi Jinping could take lessons from this Russia Ukraine conflict, and if he's going to invade based on the lessons he has learned from this conflict. Then some Chinese commentators have also suggested that a careful game plan should be adopted by Beijing. China should provide humanitarian aid. There's no doubt, there's consensus among Chinese commentators and strategic community that China should project itself as a responsible stakeholder and should definitely provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Then, of course, the part that where China has to stay neutral is gaining more momentum within the discussion. And then, of course, apart from that, it should expand a reconstruction effort in Ukraine, possibly link it with the Belt and Road Initiative, further strengthening Chinese positioning within Europe and, of course, with Ukraine, with Europe, and perhaps in turn it would lead to greater credibility to the Belt and Road Initiative. But the big question here remains, will Trump's move weaken the China Russia partnership? I think this is something that is definitely, even though there is a deniability that this is not going to happen, this cannot happen, but there is definitely some concern with respect to the prospects of China Russia partnership, or if Russia is going to be as dependent on China as it is right now, if Trump reaches out further to Russia and the US relationship with Ukraine further strained. So, in my opinion, I think for Trump, this could definitely be an ultimate play. He wants to be the US president who did not initiate a war, but he could end a war. And if he is able to do that, I think he is also aiming to steal China's peace broker image. What we have seen in the past 2 3 years, how China has been also able to project its image of a global peacemaker with the in the Middle East, even with the Myanmar. So I think this is something that's also is there within Trump's psyche. And in fact, China has been the most important competitor for Trump. And I don't think that we could really negate this factor when it comes to how Trump's foreign policy has been reshaping. But in my opinion, specifically in this Russia China partnership, Ukraine Russia equation, and China Russia Ukraine equation, I do believe that Trump's strategy is similar to very much that of China. He's taking a page from Beijing's playbook. What China has been doing is to resolve other issues, smaller issues, to focus on core issues. And for Trump, I do believe that no matter how much attention has been paid to what's happening and how he is um, praising Russian president, I do believe for Trump, Ukraine and Russia are only side battles. And I do believe the real end game for him, it seems that it is China. It is to contain China. It is to weaken China's partnership, friendships, alliances with Russia, or perhaps with other countries as well. I still do not really buy this proposition that the US, China, Russia are going to work together, and then the businessman side of Trump will take center stage here when it comes to negotiating, or it comes to de-escalating trade and tech war with China. So still do not really, if we take the what happened during Trump first administration, if we take any precedent from that, I do not really see that this is going to be one of the main priorities for Trump, specifically with respect to China. And I still do believe that containing China and stopping it from overtaking the US is one of the main priorities, one of the main goals of the MAGA campaign, the Make America Great Again campaign. However, one thing remains still very clear, that this moment does offer Beijing both challenges and opportunities. And of course, a lot of scholars, commentators are seeing it as an opportunity rather than a challenge for China. But whether it becomes more of an opportunity than a challenge, I think it all depends on how China navigates this evolving landscape and what are its next steps going to be. I think we just have to wait and watch and see how it impacts China's relationship with Europe, with Ukraine, and with Russia, and more importantly, with the United States. Thank you for watching.